Okay, this is chapter 11, part 2, malicious code and activity. This part will be a little bit shorter than part 1. So let's talk about a brief history of malicious code threats. I could just show you these points here, but that wouldn't really describe them, so let's talk about them briefly. 1970s and early 1980s academic research. The idea for self-replicating programs appeared in literature, scientific papers, and even experiments in the 1970s. Researchers made early attempts to perform routine maintenance tasks on large networks using self-distributing code, worms, but the technology did not become widespread. Key event in hostile code development was research performed by Dr. Fred Cohen in 1983. His paper, Computer Viruses, Theory and Experiments, published in 1984, defined the computer virus and described experiments he and others performed to prove the viability of viral code. The Morris worm of 1988, although that would be a little later down the timeline here, attempted to prove the number of nodes on the internet. Code wasn't written properly. This Unix-based worm, which attacked the Unix sendmail command, overwhelmed almost all computers on the internet. 1980, early PC viruses. With the advent of the first IBM PC using the MS-DOS operating system in 1981, the primary method of infection was boot sector viruses, attacking operating system components on disks and in memory, and file infector viruses, attacking executable files themselves. The primary method of transmission was infected floppy disks. 1990s early LAN viruses, local area network viruses. LANs began to appear in business environments in the early 1990s. Finding a virus then was a rare event, but connecting computers gave viruses a fertile environment in which to propagate. Interested users collected samples of codes that they found and freely distributed them on bulletin boards. By the end of the 1990s, LANs had become a key infrastructure in most companies, and its use for communications, primarily email, led to a faster method of the transfer of viruses. The mid 1990s, email worms became a major headache because they could locate an email address file with a user system and then generate multiple copies of themselves, often disguised as innocent file attachments. Melissa and Love Letter are examples. Melissa attacked on March 25th, 1999. That was when I was working at Savannah Foods and Industries, and it completely shut down our email for nearly an entire day. Um, it had an attachment that was of a certain size, and we finally got a hold of um, Microsoft told us that to set the attachment size limit on our Microsoft Exchange server to be something less than that size so that the attachment wouldn't come through on an email anymore and that we would not be able to go ahead and and then we'd be able to go ahead and shut it down and then delete all the emails. And that's what shut the emails from coming in. And then we had to delete thousands of emails because it replicated them through our email address book in Microsoft Outlook. In the 2000s, as personal and corporate internet connectivity has continued to increase, the authors of popular browsers have added numerous companion tools or plugins. These tools use specialized scripting codes that can automate certain functions, giving rise to scripting viruses such as macro viruses, SQL injection, and other scripting attacks. Two of the most famous recently both occurred in 2017. WannaCry, built by the Russian hackers Eternal Blue, and then NotPetya, which initially shut down the entirety of the global shipping company Maersk in the spring of 2017. It also hit the Ukrainian government and banking system, and then after hitting Maersk, hit numerous hospitals in the United States after contaminating a widely used medical transcription service company that these hospitals used. NotPetya was built and distributed by the Russian military GRU hacker group Sandworm, as described in extraordinary detail by author Andy Greenberg from Wired magazine in his book Sandworm, published in 2019. And here's the book. In a way, it reads like a spy novel, but it really is all true. It begins with a dramatic description of the effects of NotPetya on Maersk. He then travels back to the mid 2000s, around 2005, to begin his description of attacks emanating from Eastern Europe. It traces U.S. efforts at defending against these attacks, as well as Russian cyber attacks on the Ukraine during their attack on them in 2014, through WannaCry and NotPetya in 2017. He actually went to Russia to try to track down the attacking group in Russia's GRU, which is the main directorate of the General Staff of the Armed Forces of the Russian Federation. From there, he discussed the attack against the 2018 Winter Olympics in Seoul on the first night of the Games, named Olympic Torch, and how that led him to the group Sandworm, the group that was responsible for it, and responsible for NotPetya the year before, and the attacks on the U.S. election process in 2016. Okay, some threats to business organizations. Attacks against confidentiality and privacy. These include emerging concerns with respect to identity theft and trade secrets at both the individual and corporate levels. Attacks against data integrity. Economic damage or loss due to the theft, destruction, or unauthorized manipulation of sensitive data can be devastating to an organization. Organizations depend on the accuracy and integrity of information. Legitimacy of the source of communications also affects the integrity of the transmitted data. Attacks against availability of services and resources. Businesses increasingly depend on the internet as a means of delivery for key network services. As a result, hostile attacks that deny these services to legitimate users have become an increasing concern among IT security practitioners. Aggressive prevention, early detection, and quick recovery are essential to maintaining an acceptable level of service. Attacks against productivity and performance. Mass bulk email, spam, spyware, persistence cookies, and the like consume computing resources and reduce user productivity. Ransomware can reduce performance to zero by making important data inaccessible until the ransom is paid. Unnecessary reaction to non-existent code threats such as hoaxes can also affect productivity. Security professionals must make regular efforts to minimize the impact of such threats. Attacks that create legal liability. Unaddressed vulnerabilities can extend beyond the legal boundaries of an organization, creating a potential liability to customers, trading partners, and others. And lastly, attacks that damage reputation. Malicious code attacks can broadcast sensitive information about a company or its customers, or otherwise embarrass a company. Such attacks can damage a company's reputation. This can result in a loss of customers and potential business. Some internal threats from employees and unsafe computing practices. Exchange of untrusted disks or other media among systems. Installation of unauthorized, unregistered software. Unmonitored download of files from the internet, uncontrolled dissemination of email or other messaging application attachments. Security breaches also originate from within the victim organization, perpetrated by current and former employees. This is known as the insider threat. Such breaches often go unreported by an organization and can include the following: unauthorized access to system and network resources, privilege escalation, theft, destruction, or unauthorized dissemination of data, use of corporate network resources to initiate hostile attacks against outside targets, and the accidental or intentional release of malicious code into internal network segments not protected by perimeter controls and IDS countermeasures. Okay, the anatomy, purpose, and types of attacks. So we'll talk about what motivates attackers, the purpose of an attack, different types of attack, and phases of an attack. So what motivates attackers? Well, money, fame, political beliefs or systems, and revenge. Kind of obvious. So the purpose of an attack: denial of availability. The goal of some attacks, such as denial of service or distributed denial of service, or a ransomware attack, is to prevent legitimate users from accessing a system or data. Data modification. The attacker might issue commands to access a file on a local or network drive and modify, delete, or overwrite it with new data. Alternately, the attacker might modify system settings or browser security settings. Data export. Attackers might seek to steal information from your computer and forward it over the internet or by way of email to an attacker. For instance, many Trojan horses forward usernames and passwords to an anonymous attacker's email address on the web. The attacker can then use the passwords to access protected resources. And launch point. An attacker might target a computer for use as a launch point to infect and target other computers. Types of attacks. Unstructured attacks. Often the initial intent of these is simply personal gratification of the attacker. The thrill of the challenge. Any level of success can lead to more malicious activity. Structured attacks. Highly motivated and technically proficient attackers use complex tools and focused efforts to conduct these. They may act alone or in groups. They understand, develop, and use sophisticated hacking techniques to identify, probe, penetrate, and carry out malicious activities. Regardless of their motivation, these attackers can and do inflict serious damage to networks. Direct attacks. These are conducted against specific targets, such as specific organizations. They may also conduct direct attacks against target classes, that is, networks using certain hardware, operating system versions, or services. An example would be an IIS Unicode attack against specific web servers in an organization. These might be unstructured, such as when a script kiddie uses a well-known hacker tools to uncover vulnerable sites and then conducts random exploits around the compromised network using trial and error, or they can be structured by individual crackers or coordinated cyber terrorist governmental groups, such as Sandworm, and advance methodically through phases to achieve their desired goals. Indirect attacks. These occur as a natural result of pre-programmed hostile code exploits, such as internet worms or viruses. These attacks are unleashed indiscriminately, often propagating rapidly and widely. Most likely, the goal of a direct attack against a specific target might be to establish a starting point for an indirect attack against a more widely dispersed population. So here's how a direct attack works through the internet against the network, and they're directly attacking this particular host. And you can see the IP address here of the host that they are trying to attack. Phases of an attack. So there are four main phases: reconnaissance and probing, gaining access, maintaining the access. One would argue that in between maintaining the access and covering your tracks would be launching the attack. But here we only see four phases, and the final one is covering your tracks. So let's talk about reconnaissance and probing. The attacker collects all the information to conduct the attack. Tools include DNS and ICMP tools within the TCP/IP protocol suite. DNS tools could include reverse DNS lookup and NS lookup to search DNS information and provide cross-referencing. The Internet Control Management Protocol ICMP ping command, traceroute, and also traceroute command enable attackers to verify that target systems are reachable. For example, attackers can use the ping command with a number of extension flags to test direct reachability between hosts. You can also use ping as a part of an actual attack plan, such as carrying out the ping of death attack, where the attacker sends specially constructed ping packets that can crash vulnerable computers. Ping sweep can give the valuable information on location and availability of nodes on a network. SNMP, the Simple Network Management Protocol tools. This is an application layer protocol that facilitates the exchange of management information between network devices. It's part of the TCP/IP suite. It enables network administrators to manage network performance, find and solve network problems, and plan for network growth. Port scanners and port mappers include ZenMap, the Windows GUI front end for the Nmap port scanning tool. And security probes, Nessus or its open source variant OpenVAS, helps security administrators evaluate a large number of vulnerabilities. It recognizes several common networking, operating system, and application-related security problems and can report them without actually exploiting them. Access and privilege escalation. First, you need to establish the initial connection to a target host if you're the attacker, typically a server platform, and then gain administrative rights to the system. So if you're an attacker, it's important to maintain the access once it is gained. This can be accomplished by means of a remote administration tool or a RAT. A RAT is a Trojan that, when executed, enables an attacker to remotely control and maintain access to a compromised computer. This is done by way of one of the following: a server on the victim's machine, The server listens for incoming connections to the victim. When it receives a connection, it provides remote access for the client that connects. It runs invisibly with no user interface. And then a client on the attacker's machine. This is a GUI front end that the attacker uses to connect to and maintain servers on the victim machines. What happens when a server is installed on the victim's machine depends on the capabilities of the Trojan, the interests of the attacker, and whether another attacker who might have entirely different interests manages to gain control of the server. Covering traces of the attack. So here, the final phase, if you're the attacker, you want to remove any traces, remove files you may have created, and restore as many files to their pre-attack condition as possible. And then you want to remove log file entries that may provide evidence of your attack. Okay, we'll talk about attack prevention. Tools and techniques, of course, defense in depth, practice of layering defenses into zones to increase the overall protection level and provide more reaction time to respond to incidents. These include application defenses, operating system defenses, and network infrastructure defenses. The goals of defense in depth are there should be layers of security and detection even on single systems. Attackers must break through or bypass each layer undetected. Other layers can cover a flaw in one layer. The overall system security becomes a set of layers within the overall network security, and security improves by requiring the attacker to be perfect while ignorant. Application defenses. Implementing regular antivirus screening on all host systems. Ensuring that virus definition files are up to date. Requiring scanning of all removable data. Installing personal firewall and IDS software on hosts. Deploying change detection software and integrity checking software. Maintaining logs. Implementing email usage controls and ensuring that email attachments are scanned. Requiring all users to enable pop-up blockers in their web browsers to stop attackers from displaying pop-up windows and reducing exposure to accidental malware execution. Establishing a clear policy regarding software installations and upgrades. Ensuring that only trusted sources are used when obtaining, installing, and upgrading software through digital signatures and other validations. Some operating system defenses. Deploying change detection, integrity checking software, and maintaining logs. Deploying or enabling change detection, integrity checking software on all servers. Ensuring that operating systems are consistent and have been patched with the latest updates from vendors. Ensuring that only trusted sources are used when installing and upgraded operating system code. Disabling unnecessary operating system services and processes that may pose a security vulnerability. Network infrastructure defenses. Creating choke points in the network. Using proxy services and bastion hosts to protect critical services. Using content filtering at choke points to screen traffic. Ensuring that only trusted sources are used when installing and upgrading operating system code. Disabling any unnecessary network services and processes that may pose a security vulnerability. Maintaining up-to-date IDS signature databases. Applying security patches to network devices to ensure protection against new threats and reduce vulnerabilities. You can employ a wide variety of countermeasures in practice to prevent malicious codes. Some of these others include employing filtering software that blocks traffic to and from network segments, employing active sensors, intrusion detection, um, antivirus detection that react quickly enough to prevent or mitigate damage. Again, it mentioned the choke points and the sensors and filtering, and setting security properties within browsers to prohibit or prompt before processing scripts or active code, eliminating unnecessary connections, remote connections to the network, and employing effective access control measures to protect those required to remain available, and avoiding the circumvention of existing control systems and countermeasures. Some safe recovery techniques and practices. Store your operating system and data file backup images on external media to ease recovering from potential malware infection. Scan new and replacement media for malware before reinstalling software. Disable network access to systems during restore procedures or upgrades until you have re-enabled or installed protection software or services. Implementing effective software best practices. Adopt an acceptable use policy for network services and resources. Adopt standardized software to better control patches and upgrades and to ensure that you address vulnerabilities. Considering implementing an ISO IEC 27002 compliant security policy. Some incident detection tools and techniques, some more antivirus scanning software, of course. Some key vulnerabilities to host-based antivirus software are continuing the requirement to keep every host system updated to the most current virus definition files, and two, potential compromise of the protection through unsafe user practices, such as installing unlicensed or unauthorized software or indiscriminately exchanging infected email or document files. This is why many organizations offer network-based antivirus software, which permits screening of files and email traffic on servers and provides remote scanning and inoculation of clients on a consistent basis. Many also choose to use both host and network-based antivirus, antivirus software. Some deploy multiple products in order to maximize detection capabilities. Network monitors and analyzers, content and context filtering and logging software. When combined with a clear corporate policy on acceptable use, this becomes an additional layer of defense against malicious code. Plugins to screen email attachments and content, as well as context-based filtering, such as access control lists, on network routers also permit an additional layer of security protection. This includes analyzing network traffic for active code, Java ActiveX components, and disabling script processing on web browser software. Honeypots and honeynets. These are sacrificial hosts and services deployed at the edges of a network to act as bait for potential hacking attacks. Typically, you configure these systems to appear real. Purpose of a honeypot is to provide a controlled environment for attacks. This enables you to easily detect and analyze the attack to test the strength of the network. You install host-based IDS and monitoring software to log suspicious activity. The honeypot should contain at least the following elements: looks and behaves like a real host. At no point should it disclose its existence. It has a dedicated firewall that prevents all outbound traffic in case it is compromised. It lives in a network demilitarized zone, untouched by normal traffic. It sounds silent alarms when any traffic goes to or from it, and it begins logging all intruder activity when it first senses an intrusion. So in summary, we talked about the impact of malicious code and malware on systems and organizations, attackers, hackers, and social engineers, the phases of a computer attack, and tools and techniques to detect